President and Chief Executive Officer of UAL Corporation and United Airlines, its principal subsidiary company. Prior to joining United in September of 2000, he was Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of Chevron Texaco, as well as Interim Chairman of Dynegy Incorporated. Previously, our guest today served as Chairman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer of Texaco. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago, Glenn Tilton. Glenn?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Paul. Actually, Jay, it was 2001, although it feels very much like 2000, so it hasn't really been quite that long. I've got a couple of things I'd like to do today on behalf of all of the United colleagues that have joined me here in the room. Can everybody hear me all right with this? Can you hear me in the back of the room? It doesn't sound quite loud enough, but there you go. My first order of business is to thank all of you, certainly for being here today, and to observe how stylish you look in your new TED hats. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Feel free to put them on. Ted Klaszewski won't mind. The thanks that I really want to offer all of you is thanks on behalf of my colleagues and myself, on behalf of United Airlines for being so supportive of us during our period of difficulty. As all of you in the room know, this is a very challenging time for United Airlines. And I want to frame what it is that we are trying to do in the course of the work that we have undertaken now in personal terms for you. Said simply, what we're trying to do is to be worthy of your support here in Chicago, as we always should have been. And certainly, there are those of you in the room who know perfectly well that the company hasn't always been sufficiently focused on all of you. And there have been times when we have focused on other things that have been not as appropriate, such as ourselves. And there is no company that can be successful in this very competitive industry focusing on itself rather than on you. And there are two yous, really, for us in this business. Number one, of course, there's you individually and your family as our customers. Number two, there is you as our hometown. And that is a hugely important thing for any company, and maybe more so for United Airlines. Because a company, not unlike a family, has to have roots. And those roots define the company's personality, the company's culture, and the company's values. Those of us at United couldn't imagine, were we to have the privilege to choose, a better hometown than this one. It's a solid, solid place. It's a place that doesn't blink in the face of its own difficulties. It's a place that likes itself. One likes being from Chicago. One likes being in Chicago. We like to take Chicago forward, and we like to take Chicago around the world. And that's a privilege that we have. When we're in Beijing, as United Airlines, we have to remind ourselves that we are representatives of Chicago. And when we talk in Hong Kong about our hometown and our gateway to the United States, as I say to John and to Rosie, we need to speak of Chicago as the right gateway to the United States for perhaps somebody that is seeing it for the first time. That's a hugely important thing for us to do. And yet today, we are initiating a presence in Chicago at Midway with Ted that shows that there's also room for United to grow in Chicago. And there's also room for United to grow in Chicago as a company by focusing on skills such as these advertising and sales promotion and marketing skills that we need to be reminded are more important to the company and to its future than our restructuring skills. And that's a little something I want to talk about as well. The combination of the work that we are doing in this city in restructuring the costs of the company and the balance sheet of the company through the Chapter 11 process in Judge Wiedoff's court, and simultaneously improving the quality of the product that we have to offer all of you in Chicago. It is a hugely complex thing for a company such as ours to undertake, I think under any given circumstances. But let's step back for a moment. Let's step back for a moment. Imagine what this company has had to confront in preparation for these twin challenges. And I'll talk about a few others, but just for now, let's imagine that those are in fact the two challenges that this company needs to address. Number one, it needs to make sure that in the face of all sorts of competition, traditional and non-traditional, our colleagues at American Airlines and the new Southwest presence in Chicago, we need to compete for your business against those very worthy competitive alternatives. Every day, we need to earn your business. And every day, we need to remind ourselves that although you may be interested today at lunch, as I talk to you about the restructuring of the costs of the company, such that we can compete, you're not interested in that conversation when you're planning your next holiday or you're planning your next business trip. And there is no forgiveness for the fact that we could have every reason to suggest we're distracted. You want people to pick up the phone and provide you with quality service, and then you want that airport experience to be a quality one, and John and I want to work hard to make sure that that happens, and you want that on-board experience to be good, just as you expect, good, fair value for money, and you want to have the return trip be exactly the same. Am I wrong on that? No. And you don't want anybody on board talking to you about the difficulties of Chapter 11, right? And you don't want anybody on board suggesting that we've been through a very difficult time and you should somehow be sympathetic, right? That having been said, imagine the collapse of the Asian economy, the collapse of the dot-com economy, the attacks of 9/11, the war in Iraq, SARS, bird flu, the assault of the internet pricing, the disintermediation of pricing, transparency of pricing, all of the choices you have available to you. 80% of United's domestic routes are competed by some form of low-cost competition or another. 80%. Nobody at United Airlines needs to go to the spa to get fit. We're fit every day just having to confront that competitive reality. And now, SimpliFares. Caps on what has been clearly the most lucrative and the most profitable part of the business traveler. And our competitor in Atlanta has decided to cap those fares, as if there weren't enough challenges for us already. So imagine all of those challenges confronting this business. Step back for a second because we're in Chicago. And let's talk about challenges that were unique to United, because those challenges our colleagues at American have to respond to just as effectively as we do. Strike in the mid-'80s, the summer of 2000, which ended up being a bit of a cliche, in this town anyway, for the difficulties of doing business with, a means by which one communicated how difficult it could be to do business with United Airlines, right? An experience that it takes a company a long while to get people to leave behind, so that we can then move forward. Our ESOP governance structure a structure in which the company was owned, 55% of the company was owned by the employees of the company, with the governance prerogative affected by the elected representatives of the two employee groups, such that my predecessors found themselves negotiating labor contracts with the very people who had the authority to dismiss them, which is, in anyone's perception, a dilemma for the person having to do that. So we made things even more difficult for ourselves, uniquely difficult for those of us at United Airlines, than it was for everyone in the business. You know, I've gotten a couple of business cards from a few of you in the room suggesting that you might offer me some consultative advice. You know, one of the things that consultants do when they establish a platform of need in a company is they need to establish that there is, in fact, something that needs to be repaired or a challenge that needs to be established so that the company, the client, feels that engaging the consultant is worthwhile. They establish the need. One of the nice things at United Airlines is we don't need anybody to establish the need. It's perfectly transparent in front of us, and it really is very unambiguous. So the consultants, when they come into the building, get to skip that step. And we go right. Everything that we do, because of the nature of our restructuring, is public. We're in this town, in a restructuring courtroom that is a virtual fishbowl. Our work is transparent and made available to anybody that cares to read the paper or listen to the electronic media. So too, at the same time, is the work that we need to do to improve the fundamentals of the company to earn your continuing support. And I want to take just a step to the side for a moment and make another point. So too is the work that we need to do on both of those paths of work, such that we at the company have the credibility, so that when we lend our voice to the effort on behalf of Rosie's work to modernize O'Hare, our voice has weight and it has credibility. You want us to be able to do that on your behalf, candidly, because O'Hare and its modernization, and of course its sister airports, are important to the economy of this city and this region. I have no doubt, as a new participant in the industry, that hubs and cities and regions associated with hubs compete for economic relevance just as compellingly as the tenants do. If a hub loses relevance, sooner or later, so does the peripheral economy associated with that hub. And I can assure you that examples abound here in the United States and abroad of winners and losers. And I can also assure you that there are municipalities that understand this point and pursue it energetically to the benefit of their economy and their city, and there are those who do not, and they will lose. And in the event that they have invested before the fact on the presumption of success, those investments are going to be very difficult to generate a return. And the bondholders are going to ask themselves, where did we lose our way? So we want very much to focus on the mutual benefits to our success in this city, in both columns of work, the restructuring of the company, and the value proposition that we offer Chicago, and the quality of the product that we offer Chicago, and the fair value for money that we bring to Chicago, and the value of the experience that we represent as United Airlines, because we know that we reflect on Chicago. It's a very, very important thing for you to know that we know, and something that we need to remind our employees of. We reflect Chicago. We are ambassadors for Chicago. and our other U.S. hub cities. Let's talk a little bit about the work that we need to do in restructuring. This is fun. This is truly fun. This energizes an organization. TED in Midway, fun. Leg-to-leg combat with our colleagues at American, bless your hearts for giving us the opportunity to do so, fun. Economy Plus, fun. 1K, fun. Red carpet clubs, fun. That's why people are attracted to the business. It's an emotional business. It's an experience business. The guerrilla marketing associated with this, fun. Restructuring the company because the cost of the company got out of line, not fun. Not fun. Difficult. You don't do that, you don't get to do this. Right? Simple, fundamental truth. We became the poster child for restructuring in this industry. We actually had a point in time in which we aspired to be the high-cost carrier. We actually had it as a bit of an internal slogan. And everybody understands that we thought that that would be all right because we thought that the yields in the business were going to return to historic levels, which meant that we thought that business was going to perceive that it could continue to pay, not fair value for money, but excessive value for money for the product that we delivered and the service that we provided. That can't happen. We are now transparent. We compete with transparent choices. In some instances, we compete with people that the flying public don't even know they're buying because all they really buy is a fare. And it isn't until they get to the airport they discover who it is they're flying. Now, if you're that indifferent to where you park your fanny in a seat, this is really a very, very competitive business. And we had better make certain that we provide superior value for money to get you to search for a united experience. That's fun. Moving an organization back to competitiveness rather than forward to competitiveness, not fun. But it is what this company needs to do to restore its right to make the choices that we have been making simultaneously to grow the enterprise. The remarkable thing from my perspective is the manner in which we have been able to do both. Take $7 billion out of the cost structure, target a balance sheet that is going to be the envy of the network carriers upon our emergence from Chapter 11. I've been around business for a long time. And when I say $7 billion out of a cost structure on a forward basis, out of a $15 billion firm, counting all revenues, including non-flying revenues, that's a restructuring order of magnitude that I think is significant in any industry. But you can imagine how difficult it is to take $7 billion out of a company's cost structure. Immediately pre-9/11, over 100,000 employees, today 60,000 employees. 80% of the officers of the company new to their positions. Of the 80%, about 45% new to the company. Still attracting new talent. Not unusual for me to board an aircraft and have an employee tell me 40% pay reduction, 45% pay reduction, 50% pay reduction, remortgaging my home, selling my home, buying down into a new home, rethinking the way forward for my family budget, but I'm still here. And the only way that that makes any sense is for the enterprise that receives that concession to be in a position to make good of the proceeds and to invest in a viable company going forward that understands the marketplace and competes for your business in this room as we should. And that's what the restructuring is all about. Providing United with the platform of financial competitiveness and viability, which upon exit attracts interest from this room, not only in the context of your role as passengers and civic supporters, but also investors. We have got to reach a point at which we are an investable proposition. And not just investable from partners and vendors and insiders to the industry. But to those to look to United Airlines and say, that's the one that's showing the way. If you want to invest in an airline that actually is breaking out of the historic dysfunction of the industry and making the tough choices, such that you would actually put a discretionary dollar into something other than a ticket, maybe you would own a share. That's the objective also of the restructuring. I'm going to close with a few comments here about the choices that we're making for the products that we hope to present to you. Let's start with this one for a moment. TED, as you may have read, is now growing by 20%. TED is going to grow to 56 aircraft, all of them A320s. TED is a simple fleet, a straightforward fleet and a straightforward configuration. The employee advisory committees that continue on a day in and day out basis suggest ways to improve TED. Understand that in TED we have created a new product within a product that has the opportunity to actually teach its older sibling something about customer satisfaction. And we are well pleased with TED. Said simply, despite early skepticism, on every mission that we have flown TED, TED has taken share away from the competitor, and TED has outperformed its predecessor, older brother. That's TED. United. United's moving abroad in a very big way. I talked to an audience on the West Coast last week of the Asia Society and talked about the fact that 25% of the company's full capacity today is deployed in Asia Pacific. We are taking full advantage of the access that we have to China, to Japan, Nagoya, Osaka, Narita, Tokyo, to Hong Kong, to Shanghai, to Beijing, and really, in a very exciting launch, access to Vietnam. There's something really elegant about a Chicago company flying to Vietnam for the first time in 30 years with the first U.S. flag carrier back into Vietnam. It was a very, very emotional moment for the passengers on that inaugural flight, and I think really a moment at which you could say that we can all now put the past behind us in that part of the world. We continue to increase the traffic that we have available to us, the route structure that we have available to us to take advantage of across the Atlantic. And we are now flying more and more trips from Chicago and Dulles to Latin America, having decided that Miami was best left to our colleagues here at American. We continue to, no disrespect to Miami, we continue to bring new product to bear on the market that is not only that which you experience when you're on board, but it's also the loyalty scheme products that we have available. We have access to you to have a conversation relative to your travel needs on a regular basis. And we'd like to further the proposition of one-stop shopping. So we're creating Amenity Club, as an example, that affords you the opportunity to do business with United when you're in touch with United, and all sorts of things, extending out to booking cruises on our cruise site. And of course, we want to make sure that you continue to accumulate those miles so that you can invest your miles in a restructured, competitive, and forward-looking United that's going to offer you more choices on redemption. All of which brings us back to the restructuring is the foundation, the restructuring is necessary, the restructuring gets a lot of attention from the media, both here in Chicago and across the country, but the product's the thing. The product's the thing, Chicago's the thing, the market's the thing, and the customers are the point. You're the point. We haven't always perhaps known that as much as we should, but we know it now. And the best thing that I can do here today, graciously invited by Paul to convey to you the message for my colleagues, from my colleagues, is welcome to the new United. Welcome to our realization of the importance of our relationship with you. If you've enjoyed being associated with the company up until now, you're going to enjoy it a heck of a lot more from this point forward. Thank you very much. I'd be glad to take your questions. Thank you.
If you have questions, line up behind the microphone so you could. There's microphones over there, Mr. Roebling. Yes, ma'am. State your name and carry on.
Sylvia Dunn. I'm a recruiter with CBI, and I have a question for you that I'm sure a lot of people have. I'm a frequent visa user to get my miles, and whenever I attempt to get my free flight, there are no free flights. I can get one for $1,700. I'd love to go to Italy in June, but I can't get across the pond. Do you have any suggestions for me?
Well, for us, it's a bit of a high-class problem, but we're going to work on it. One of the phenomena that we're experiencing are very, very high load factors on the aircraft today. And we're aware of this situation, and we want to make sure that we're in a position to be able to address it so that we can have capacity available to you, those of you that want to redeem. It's interesting, I thought perhaps your question was going to be a question of concern relative to how about my miles, but that's less a question today than it ever has been before with respect to the progress the company's made. But to give you a sense of the current level of traffic, about 4 Saturdays ago we had the single highest revenue load factor day in the history of the company, 93.5%. And in March, the company's load factors were 83.5. Said simply, we're flying full aircraft. And in the course of the restructuring, we're sort of limited to the fleet that we have available to us, before we move on. We understand that there are people that want very much to redeem the free flights and the privileges that they've earned, and we're working on perhaps carving out a period of time and seats that we will then communicate with you in advance to sort of give you a sense of when they will be available. And so we begin the conversation rather than you begin the conversation. And that's something we're working on now, and it may, in fact, alleviate the dilemma of not thinking about you when we actually plan the load factors.
I want to add something else. One of your agents told me that only about 2% of the seats were allowed for frequent flyer miles per plane. That's not very many seats on the plane.
Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the issue we're looking at. Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Robley.
Thanks, Mr. Tilton. Simple question. What's your target for cost per passenger mile? And what's your expectation on revenues per passenger mile?
Yeah. Our costs for the entire fleet is in the low 8s, 8 cents. You may know that we went into it with about 11 cents on a CASM basis as the highest. So we're going to reduce it down into the mid-8s. Currently, with fuel, that's a huge challenge for us with fuel where it currently is. All of us sitting as network carriers probably in the high 9s to flat 10s. The best way to speak to the revenue issue on the first quarter, revenue is on plan and expense ex fuel for the company for the first quarter of the year is on plan. We are able to make our plan, and as you saw in the second month of the year, actually add to the cash account despite these fuel prices. So as we calibrate the effect, we consider the effect of fuel on the company. These targets are targets that will move with fuel, but right now that's where they sit.
Jim O'Roy.
Well, I'd like to play for just a moment one of those free consultants that you were talking about. I like your comments, your reactions. We're all subject to our own history and our own experiences. And my experience in the dairy business was that people said that milk was a commodity subject to the lowest price, and nobody would pay anything higher than the higher price. But I found that, in fact, if you offer a better product, people will pay a higher price. My suspicion is that so many of you in the airline industry view a seat as a commodity that must be sold at the lowest price without much differentiation. It seems to me that you're missing a point that I, as a consumer, would be very willing to pay $10 each way, or $20 each way, or maybe even $30 each way, but not $100 each way to fly on United rather than to fly on Southwest Airlines or some other airline. You offer premium product, you deliver a much better service. You have upgrade possibilities, you have frequent flyer miles, you have the economy plus seating. Those are things that I would pay for within a limited band, but it seems to me that the focus is it must be the lowest price or else we're going to stick them for this huge high price. And I object to being stuck with a huge high price, but I don't mind a small increase.
Well, actually, I think it's a great intro into this campaign and to the effectiveness of Economy Plus. we are actually continuing to offer Economy Plus on board in 40% of the economy cabin. And for customers that we would like to disabuse of the notion of commoditization, we can actually communicate the availability of Economy Plus electronically at the point that the customer engages the kiosk to receive the boarding pass. And we're actually getting a tremendous take-up on a simple conversation that says, for $45 or $55, would you be interested in upgrading to Economy Plus? Because we have Economy Plus seats available to you. And that dialogue back and forth, making it available to those customers that thought perhaps there was only economy, is actually proving very productive, very profitable for us. So we're going to continue to do so. And the same really, as you think about it, is true of TED and the transparency of the TED offering relative to the first class offering on narrow bodies, and actually putting first class on regional jets, such as the new 70-seaters that are going to be flying out of O'Hare. The new Embraer and the new Canadair product actually has 6 first-class seats, which really is a premium product in a regional experience that most people are surprised to find available to them, including Economy Plus on those 70-seaters as well. So we're actually getting some nice product distinction.
Okay, Jeff.
John Berkowitz, I'm an executive legal recruiter, but I also host and produce Public Affairs, airing every Monday night, 8:30 on cable channel 21 throughout the city of Chicago. Tonight's show, former state senator, possible gubernatorial candidate in the Republican primary, Adam Allen.
I'm absolutely tuning in.
Great.
Jeff, a plug's okay, a speech, no. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Chairman Tilton, you've spoken briefly about actually fairly extensively about how you've scaled back costs for your airline. Would you also advise the mayor to scale back his estimated costs of about $15 billion for modernization and expansion of care? And whatever the figure is, how do you think that figure will be paid for?
Well, I think 2 things. Number one, O'Hare should cost exactly what the work product associated with the benefit, what the project is worth. And we should simply do good work and make sure that modernizing O'Hare is fair value for money received. And I mean, I think that's for value received, and I think that's what we should do. I wouldn't want to presuppose what it's going to cost now as we move forward. My sense of it is that it's been properly budgeted. You know that we are staunch supporters of it. We agree with the plan. We agree with the role that we're going to play in the plan. And as you heard me say emphatically, I think a modernized O'Hare is key to the prosperity of the region. So it's an important partnership for us and one that we very much support. Look, we've really seen the benefits of a modernized Denver. DIA has been a huge benefit to the company to have a hub in that facility. Stapleton clearly was challenged, and it has the opportunity to grow beyond your original perception of the investment. So, as somebody that I was talking to John just the other day, as somebody that has seen the benefit of a modernized Hong Kong, seen the benefit of a modernized Pudong, seen the benefit of a modernized Beijing today. We're talking to the planners in Beijing about modernizing Beijing and turning Beijing into a hub. And if you think about the location of Beijing, it's analogous to O'Hare's situation here in the continental U.S. This is work that needs to be done not after the demand has been created, but anticipation of the future and the demand that's going to be there for the airport.
How's it going to be paid for?
So I think it's going to be paid for through its commercial success.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. My name is Francine Manilow. I have a company called Manilow Suites. And I was a United Airline flight attendant for going on 40 years.
Bless your heart.
Proudly so.
How many years?
40. Moving on, as I look back, to me, the greatest leaders in my 40-year experience with United was William Patterson, who I fondly remember, as well as Eddie Carlson. And the one ability, if any, that I saw these 2 men have was their ability to motivate people. I felt good of being part of United in those days. And We talk about structure and airplanes and routes, but in reality, if you don't have the people behind you, from the flight attendant and the passenger agent, they're the ones that have the greatest, we all know that,
Right.
contact with the passenger.
Right.
Then what do you have? And I have the greatest admiration and respect. And we all wish you well, but sir, may I plead with you and ask you as well, what you're doing to help in motivating these flight attendants who have very sadly been most disappointed in recent events such as pensions, et cetera. Thank you.
Right. You know, I think that there's nobody in the room that would disagree that in our business, a people business, our people are certainly more important than our aircraft or the configuration of the aircraft on board. And the remarkable story of the restructuring of the company to date is the performance of the United people. That is the most compelling story. For this company to be the only network carrier to be ranked in the top 5 on the quality survey by Wichita State University of all commercial aviation in this country is remarkable. The only network carrier that improved its rating, the only network carrier that has made its way into the top 5, number 4, all a function of the performance of our people. Our people have clearly had to make concession to alleviate the cost pressures on the company. But their performance has not gone down, it's gone up. In many cases, their keen awareness of the challenges of the company that I shared with this audience earlier today really improves their morale. We do a number of things in the company that I found we were not doing adequately upon my arrival. We communicate with the employees of the company all of the time in real time. The frontline managers communicate with the employees. I communicate with the employees. One of the truly marvelous things about this business, if you happen to be the CEO in this business, is your ability to interact with your employees on a constant basis. Anytime I travel, I'm in the company of my employees and I have opportunity to talk to them in perpetuity. You know, from the cockpit to on board, to the concourse, to check-in, to the red carpet clubs, wherever they may be, to the briefing rooms. And you're constantly in a position to be able to talk to them, which is very different from, perhaps a financial services a chief executive officer that fundamentally spends most of his or her time in the office. So it's very different that way. They understand the message of the company. There are many of them that could have come to this podium and delivered the same message that I delivered today as to what we're trying to do with the company as we restructure the company and we go through these difficult times. And what I think they also understand is there aren't any easy answers. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts to our getting ourselves out of the hole that we created for ourselves. It is simply hard work. I think they also understand that it is never going to be as it used to be. You know, the world is now a very different place. And at United, I also think that a lesson that's been learned is that we're all responsible really for our own morale, and we motivate ourselves first. And we get up in the morning and we establish what face we're going to put on. And then we draw strength from the presence of colleagues who are committed to the same thing that we are at United, and that's to transform the company to make certain that we lead the industry. So morale is a hugely important thing. Communication about the truth of our circumstances is, I think, the best tonic that we can bring to our employees so that they understand that we're delivering the message straight.
Thank you. May I wish you that?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bless your heart.
My name is Mike Retzlowski. I'm a city club lawyer. I have a question that goes in a little bit different direction. I mean, I follow through Cranes and some of the bankruptcy pleadings in your efforts of getting restructuring and getting help from the federal government. And I guess my perception as an outsider was that you were not getting a fair deal, particularly the way that the United U.S. Airway merger was treated.
Right.
Is there what are your reactions to that? Or is there anything we can do to make sure we get a fair deal?
Yeah, two quick responses to really a two-part question. Number one, I'm on record now, and I've said earlier last week, I said last week in a speech on the Coast, I do think that the consolidation of this industry needs to take place, and I think there need to be fewer network carriers. There's too much capacity in the market. There are very, very few barriers to entry. Virtually anybody can get into the business. I've on occasion used Hooters as an example. If Hooters can build an airline, I don't know that anybody else can't. So it is truly an issue. Plenty of available aircraft, so it's quite difficult. I think that there are currently, if you move US Air aside for a moment as they go through their reinvention, there are 5 network carriers in the country. I think 5 is too many, perhaps too many by 2. Having come off of the Chevron-Texaco merger, you can imagine my perspective. Having been on the coast last week, such that the Chevron-Texaco merger has now become the Chevron-Texaco-Unocal merger, while I'm still talking about it, you can understand that I'm of a mind that it's a compelling thing for us to do. And of course here, in a city that has gone through JP Morgan Chase Bank One, just to use an example, now Kmart Sears, and those are industries, frankly, that aren't facing the challenges that we are. So I think that the consolidation issue is one that we need to confront. The ATSB is a matter of some more complexity. I think that by the time that we had done the work that we knew we needed to do, and we had reduced the application for the guarantee to 1.1 rather than 1.6 billion dollars, and 1.1 would be guaranteed by the ATSB and 900 million would be at risk. I think that the ATSB really can't be criticized for coming to the conclusion that you have it within your wherewithal to do the work and to be financeable without our guarantee. We certainly had a fiduciary responsibility to pursue the guarantee on behalf of all constituent groups. But now that I have 4 proposals in hand from financial institutions, all of them establishing that if we do the work that we have set out to do, we are financeable either to the tune of $2.5 to $2 billion. In effect, the ATSB has been affirmed in its view that we can do the work ourselves and we can go to the capital markets and finance the exit and the future of the company.
With regard to that first issue, what
Yep.
help or how do we get the federal government to understand what you need to do to?
I think from the perspective of our 5 hubs throughout the United States, engaging the government in a debate relative to this simple proposition, a healthy domestic network aviation industry is of importance to the economic vitality of the municipalities, the cities, the states, and the regions. And I think that's true. An industry that continues to go through the perpetuity of restructuring, as this industry has, is not of benefit to anyone. So that message, I think, ought to be conveyed to just about every elected official you can engage. Thank you very much.
John Borling.
Hi, John.
Performance Consulting Group and Energy Solutions Company, Glenn. Take it down a level then to the state and city level. You speak eloquently about Chicago and the image that we portray, that you want to portray as gateway, et cetera. But there's articles as recently as this morning about taxes on gasoline, et cetera, that the state puts in that are frankly pejorative to the very kinds of efforts you're talking about.
Right.
What kind of efforts do you want to get that would be helpful from the state, if any?
I think we need to have a dialogue with all of the states, thanks, John, on the issue of windfall profits associated with taxation that taxes the huge escalation in near-term oil price and jet fuel price. And there's clearly a way to graduate the escalation of exposure that the company has to that rapidly rising price that could modulate the effect on the company. And we're having a conversation with a number of states as to how best to do it. I think that an example has been set in the state of Georgia where a cap has been established, and beyond that cap, Delta need not go and won't go as long as it buys its jet fuel in the state of Georgia. That's going to give Delta a competitive advantage. It may well give Georgia a competitive advantage as we go forward. And Georgia clearly is taking that view that investing in a cap on the receipts that they get off of jet fuel tax is a means by which the state really invests in its own prosperity rather than subsidizes Delta. They simply invest in the perpetuity of the importance of Hartfield. So there are 2 examples out there.
To close, sir.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. My name is Bill Flock. I'm
Hi, Bill.
an airport consultant. And this morning I was reading an article written by the Wall Street analysts, and they were commenting on the difficult problem that network carriers are having in accessing capital. And I wonder if you might be able to comment on your opinion, on your position in United's on the federal rules restricting foreign ownership of U.S. carriers and how that might help.
Yeah. I have said repeatedly that I supported the Department of Transportation's initiative not too long ago to raise the current 25% cap on foreign ownership to 49%. And they floated that proposal, and to date it really hasn't gone anywhere. My considered view is that there need be no cap whatsoever. That if we are confronting a world of global enterprise in which KLM, Air France, and eventually somebody else are going to create a genuine Euro carrier of extraordinary breadth, and we're confronting a world in which the Asian carriers may well, I think the contemplation currently is Cathay, Dragonair, and perhaps a Chinese carrier, are going to create super carriers. And clearly in the international markets, we're competing against them. To preclude the US-based network carriers from accessing pools of global capital simply hamstrings our ability to compete financially with those companies, and I don't think it makes any sense. I think there are legitimate concerns of security, access to aircraft in times of emergency, and a whole suite of other things that can be resolved without having to continue a 25% limitation on foreign ownership in network carriers in the U.S. My pleasure. Thank you.
How about a nice round of applause? Good job.